Hey, what's going on, Andrea? Welcome back to the Shift Show. It's been forever since we recorded this.
It has.
So we're just going to power through the intro of it.
Yeah, we might be a little rusty. I don't know. I'm ready to.
How long has it been since we actually recorded? I know that that we released some older episodes or backlogged ones or whatever, but it's been 6 months, it feels like.
I don't even know.
Long
but
time.
We are back. We've got some interesting stuff for our new season.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm excited to be here to do this with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been you just don't know what you're missing kind of thing until we're back, right? So
yeah, I think it's also interesting. Our topic really ties into it's been a crazy couple months. So
yeah. For people at home who are recording this, one of the last days of July 2022, the world's a weird place. Lots of unknowns, and we're gonna kind of talk about how do you stay sane in a world where things are weird. And this is it's not just right now, it's very relevant all the time, but particularly in society today, I think it's a more important issue.
Yeah, I think it's how do you manage those external stressors?
Mm-hmm.
How do you reduce the noise so that you can live a beautiful, happy, calm, peaceful, productive, focused, all those things existence? Because there's just so much of it right now.
Totally.
Yeah.
Ding. Yeah. And external stressors, right? So what do we mean by that?
Yeah.
What do we mean by that's a very technical type of term.
Very psych
term
from the psychs. Yeah. Well, I think if we look at it right now, we're kind of coming out of, the lockdowns and the pandemic and the COVID and all of that. And we're hearing stuff constantly in news now about, rising inflation and gas is going through the roof and there's going to be supply chain shortages and there's all this political division and what's going on with that. And I don't know, Davos is taking over the world or whatever they're doing.
Germany's going to run out of gas in the winter or whatever.
Yeah. And there might be a World War III situation and so on and so on. Yeah. And then Europe's going to freeze and the dollar's being this and stocks are tanking and there are all of these things and we're hearing about them constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And they are things that affect almost everyone, right? The price of gas, that's a lot of people. And then the food I eat, you eat, everybody's kind of got to do that a little bit. Housing, that's a whole nother thing. What's going to happen to the real estate market with, you've got these rising interest rates and most people
Am I going to be able to afford my mortgage or
or can I buy one? Can I get into the market or whatever the thing is? And we're hearing this at an unprecedented rate now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we've had that whole, the information era. We come out of the internet's a thing now and everybody can have access to so much information. Everybody's all excited about that. And what do we have? We have a situation where we have access to more and more information. And then with the rise of social media, it's different because now we're not going on and looking stuff up. The stuff is just being boom, popped into over and over and over on a literal loop. And I think that that's taking up so much space in our brains. And we haven't evolved. The human animal hasn't evolved yet to handle that many inputs and inputs that we don't select, which is another thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just about these problems that we also wouldn't have seen at scale, right? If we go back to our little caveman day, we're looking about our hunger, our tribe's safety, very insular, very small. And now you've got what's happening with global warming or the war in Ukraine or, the calibration of the monetary fiat system or whatever. And you're I don't know. Little walnut brain is I don't know about what to do about those things.
And if you think of it from an evolutionary standpoint of what is and a, sort of what our brain is designed for. 2 generations ago, people were thinking about I'm going to read the local paper. And 2 generations before that, it was
radio.
How are my crops doing?
Well, exactly. Right? What's happening in my town or in my village or what's going on with my neighbor? And you keep going back to that. And obviously there were problems. It's not 2 generations ago, everything was golden. It's just, I think that the amount we are aware of the problems now is huge. And the amount of problems that aren't necessarily directly relevant to us that still come into our minds, way bigger. And then you get other things like comparative factors. Let's go through a couple of the things that are going on now. And we'll talk about what we're seeing kind of in our client populations and what we know a little bit about what it does to our walnut, our not pre-evolutionary, but, early caveman brain and all of that stuff.
Well, and I feel going into this conversation too, just letting people know, don't worry, we're going to tell you what to do about this. So like, we're not here to just only stress you out.
Oh, I thought we were just going to do the thing where we just talk about all the shit and then be like, yeah, some things to think about. Have a good day. No, we're not going to do that, because the whole point of it is to answer that question of, how do I manage this? Like, how do I best manage this so that I can get back into that like happy space, or stay in that happy space? Because that's another thing, is that consistent maintenance of that. Challenging.
Yeah, totally.
And it's kind of work in progressy thing.
Especially when you've got like, you know, with I know often it's invoked to like kind of shit on social media in general, but we literally have entire algorithms and business models that are based on how do we keep your attention for the longest, and the best way to do that is to trigger your stress response.
Yeah, because that's you're calibrated to pay attention to threats.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they did it on purpose or whatever, but
I don't know. I
haven't chatted with them.
Yeah.
There's different camps on that.
Not everybody meant to, but some of them probably did.
100%. And also,
or they let it happen.
And not everybody knows what triggers everybody too, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you can look at, a scene. I know I was talking to a client a while ago, and one of her biggest triggers was seeing a happy couple walking in the park. Because she's having trouble like with the dating thing, and then time pressure, and wants to have a baby, blah 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 blah. And so there's different things in there as well. Now those are kind of the more nuanced things. There's some stuff that there's probably zero population on the planet that's going to listen to certain news stories or whatever and be like, well, it's a great day in wherever.
Yeah.
Out of that, right? And we know certain things do cause that threat response more than others. One of them that we're hearing a lot about right now is this whole like supply chain, food shortages,
inflation,
like on repeat,
Yeah.
Anytime there is a threat of I'm not going to have my resources, your walnut brain, your like caveman brain is like threat, registers that for sure as a threat. Big problem, scarcity complex, that's gone up. We're all still very concerned about having the stuff that we need to survive. And your walnut brain is very calibrated to focus on that survival thing.
Totally.
Right? But it doesn't understand how to talk to that evolved part of your brain, the cognitive part of your brain, to necessarily make sense of it. So what you're doing is you're invoking this response and then you're like walking around with it.
Yeah.
Right? Like it has no endpoint.
Yeah.
And then you do it again later. You're like, oh, now I'm off work. Now I'm going to like scroll through TikTok or whatever. And then it's like, boom, 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 more of that, more of that, more of that. And the other thing is, if we go back into like caveman days and we're hanging out, so you and I are in like a little caveman tribe now, and you're sitting around the fire, maybe we're cooking some meat, whatever. And we see something in the distance rustling. And we're like, ooh, could be predator. That
this is Joe from down like 2 miles down the road in his tribe, and he's going to come steal our food or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh no, there's a threat there. So threat registered once, and then there's an action taken. We're not just going to keep hanging out cooking our food if we think that there's a threat over there. But now what we're doing is we're looking at these threats. Oh no, threat, food supply. Oh no, inflation. Oh no, gas prices. Oh no, this. Oh no, that. Oh no, da 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 da. And there's no action with it. And there's no time to process and like kind of evaluate that threat either. So say we look over there and we're like, oh no, that is
it's like the equivalent of just like you just like, oh, look over there, and also over there, and they're like, oh shit, we're surrounded.
Yeah. And there and there and there and there and there. And you're just like, I don't even know if these are our people coming back or if it's the other tribe that's trying to like, take our stuff or boom. So what does the human animal do? The same thing that we see animals do, right? If they get overwhelmed, you got a couple of responses, you're going to run, right? But we're not doing that because we're parked on our couch or wherever.
Yeah.
You're going to fight it. Well, how are you doing that? You can't fight it. Like I can't be like, oh, bad Ukraine
Keyboard
story.
warriors. That's what happens.
Yeah. I'm not beating Putin up, right? So that's not happening. So then we go to the other one, which is that freeze. Yeah. So it's just an avoidance response. We get like kind of like frozen, encapsulated, and then there's more and more on top of that. So it like doubles down, more and more and more. And then you have your kid coming in the living room being like, I don't feel well. And you're like, oh, great. Yeah. And it's just whoosh, maximum.
Yeah.
And then we do that on repeat, like over and over and over without even the time to process that is what's happening. So people are getting into a really strange sort of situation. We see this reflected in the rates of suicidality, addiction, all of your mental health concerns. But if we're seeing rates of mental health concerns, your official clinical diagnoses kind of stuff. What is happening on the other end of that spectrum, like in the mid-range, right? Like, are we moving away from having really satisfied, joyful, purposeful, content and peaceful existences? It certainly seems that way.
It's interesting because I hear that, and then I also there's a what's the book? Is it The Rational Optimist? Have you read this one? I think that's what it's called. Anyway, basically just the idea that like a lot of it is the fact that like, although in spite of the fact that all of these things are being thrown at us all the time, if you look at what are the stats of like how many people died due to like war or due to poverty or due to XYZ thing, right? World's actually doing pretty good, right? We're doing better than and not to say that that we don't have things to work on, but like we're humanity is trending in the right direction.
Definitely.
And so like with both of those happening at the same time, part of it as well is how much of this is actually a reflection on what's actually going on, like how uncommon is this actually, and how much of it is you've got a freaking computer in your hand 24/7 that is very eager to tell you how terrible it is because it keeps you engaged.
Yeah, it's managing the distortion. I think that's one piece of it. And then the other thing that I think people aren't having the time to do, that is like time in that processing spectrum, is evaluate that threat. So like, again, if we're back in our little caveman scenario, we have time to look and be like, oh, wait, that's Joe. He took our bananas last time. Okay, I know how to fix this situation. Can you go get the club and we'll go chase Joe away? Like that's not too fast, right? Like you have time to evaluate it,
but like
time to make a
using
plan.
that at this point, like we now have, somebody within our own tribe even who's gonna very eager to tell everybody, oh, there's that Joe again. He's gonna make up all these stories about how terrible Joe is.
Do you remember when?
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's just like, oh, okay, like
because we've got systems right now in place that feed off sensationalism. Right? Whether it's social media and the comments, somebody posts a video, you see how many like they're like that anonymous comment thing where there's so much like blah, blah, blah. And that person looks fat there and they're like a terrible, stupid idiot and stuff that we wouldn't say. So pulling away those social connections and like putting more anonymity on things is very foreign to humans. We're not used to interacting in an anonymous fashion. I can't come up and just insult you without having a consequence. When we do the anonymous thing, we remove the consequence and then we get inundated with a whole bunch of negativity. So that's like one interesting twist with it. And we know that that's happening more and more. We see that also in increased, like in the cyberbullying realm, but also with adults, right? Then you throw on some nice cancel culture stuff. That's great too. So it's like, oh, if you say the wrong thing, Zach, on this podcast, then we're going to cancel you. You're going to fire from your job. You're not going to have a livelihood. Like that's a weird, insane amount of pressure and internal policing, because it stops people from being able to explore their own thoughts or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So we've got that going on. The other thing is with the whole lockdown situation and the pandemic and all of that, what we saw is people are at home more, right?
Yep.
At home, we're bored. What do we do when we're bored? Well, now we've got all of these pacifiers.
Doom scroll. Yeah.
Doom scroll. We've got increased drinking, increased drug use. There's an opiate crisis going on right now. We've got increased porn usage. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff there. The binge watching, like that became part of our vernacular to be like, oh, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I binge watched Stranger Things. That just translates to I sat down and had an external input in my head for like 13 hours where I didn't have to think and could be a fucking zombie. Like that's what that means. And we're like, yeah, that's fine. That seems reasonable. And also how foreign is that, right? So, we're not sitting around the fire late at night because I'm playing the fiddle or whatever. This is what I imagine people did before. Now we're having all of these things eclipse what I think is probably the thing that humans value the most, like probably more than health, probably more than social connection. There's another thing. And that's our thoughts, right? Because if you don't have that, like it's the keystone to everything that you do, everything that you are, everything that you manifest, everything that you will, like whether it's legacy, accomplishment, health, connection, all that. Like if you don't get that going on, the thinking thing, and how to look at that and develop a mindset of abundance that's going to work for you and of productivity, none of that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing the trends in the behavioral outputs and the mental health kind of stuff and the emotional outputs of what happens when we don't allocate and don't create like the proper mindset.
It sounds like that, like when you say that, like what's really important is our thoughts. Do you mean like our autonomy, like to have that independent of input, or like
both? Like I think it is just the ability to think,
mm-hmm.
right? And to think unfettered.
And not be like mindful, or to not be in autopilot.
Yeah, 100%. Because here's the thing. If I'm just scrolling and letting like whatever come into my head, I'm not actively thinking or generating anything, mm-hmm. right? So even if I'm watching like a guy cooking and I'm like, oh, Parmesan garlic bread, there's not necessarily that like next part where I'm going to impact my life by like going and making the Parmesan garlic bread and enjoying it or whatever, right? It's just like next thing. So it's literally occupying your mind. So you can't make plans. You can't be creative, can't be innovative. You can't do any of the stuff because all of your mental resources are being misallocated to something mm-hmm. else. And I'm not saying like never, ever, ever. It's kind of like the healthy diet thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a volume thing. But what we saw when people are at home or they're locked down, I was going to say locked up,
mm-hmm.
a little Freudian slip there.
Yeah.
Anyway, when they're locked down, it's like we are reaching for what's easy because that's what the walnut brain is trained to do, right? Seek mm-hmm. the like high fat food or whatever. Do what's easy to occupy us and what's easy to remove the negative emotion of boredom is a lot of that stuff that starts to occupy your mind and take your autonomy away
mm-hmm.
because you can't have autonomy if you don't have thoughts,
mm-hmm.
right? Like you're not making any decisions for yourself.
Yeah. You're not doing it intentionally. You're just kind of like, whatever. I'm already stressed enough as it is. I'm tuning out because I'm just in survival mode over here. And so I don't have room to actually stop and think. And I do think that there's a certain amount of I guess one question would be like, is thinking, and maybe this is something that is maybe a myth that people accept that we need to like kind of attack a little bit. But I think I could hear that like some people would say, oh, well, that is a luxury for people who can afford to do that, right? What if I'm like working nonstop, or what if I'm whatever, right? Like I don't have time is one of the things that I hear.
I have this argument with clients like fairly often of, can you set aside an hour to like plan and think and ponder and figure out what you want to do? No, I can't. I'm too busy. I got to run here. I got to do this thing. And then I got to like da-da-da-da-da-da. But then you also go, okay, fine. Can I see your screen usage for the week?
Yeah.
Different conversation completely after that. Because it's like, damn it, I got caught. I'm going to detention. Just kidding. But we always have a bit of time. I think it varies how much time, right? Because if you are in a situation where, you're doing a lot of survival mode, you're not going to have as much. But then that time that you have is even more valuable because you want to get yourself out. You want to use your thinking power, your superpower to get yourself out of that survival mode as much as you can, right?
Mm-hmm. And it actually doesn't take as much time as you'd think as far as actually the refreshing to be able to bring that stress level down and to be able to be just more aware and more present. It doesn't take nearly as long as you would think.
No, it just has to be really deliberate and there has to be a commitment to it. And the reason why it's hard is because your walnut brain is like, it's literally calibrated to find the easiest way to remove that pain point, right? So if I think about a problem I'm having in my life and I'm like, oh, my house is like a fucking disaster, super, super messy, whatever. Walnut brain's like, ugh, I don't like this feeling.
And for people at home who this is their first episode, we have episodes on walnut brain as well. Link in the description or on the website.
Yeah. It's kind of your survival brain.
Yeah.
So walnut brain's going to suggest to me like the easiest thing. Oh, let's just watch a show, or like, let's just like have a nap, or let's just go eat some chips. It doesn't want to entertain that like annoying feeling that comes with the thought of like the house is a disaster. Right. But how many minutes of free thought would it take me to put together a bit of a plan to at least attack part of that? right? Like, I'm just going to organize the shoes in the boot room now or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's those types of things and that commitment to moving it around. And I think that there's a thing that's happening as well is like, I don't think we recognize how much more dependent most people became on their devices and on their screens during COVID and how that trend didn't let up after.
Yeah.
Like it didn't go away. Now we're just like more attached to it. And you can see that also like not only with the COVID stuff, but also that evolution of like from the internet, which I'm old enough to remember the like AOL dial-up.
Yeah.
All the way to carrying it around all the time. And it is that question of like, how much is reasonable? And then how much is that change affecting our capacity for thought? Because you go from having a lot of moments of boredom, right? Like, you know, you're sitting in a waiting room 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Totally different situation than sitting in a waiting room now. It's like no boredom, straight to it. So a couple things with that is, again, not a lot of like capacity for free thought there. And the other one is it starts to mess with your ability to focus for a long time. Like we're getting more and we're getting absolutely inundated with ADHD kind of requests and diagnoses and like all of that, like unprecedented.
At least the symptoms consistent with, if you want to be super technical about it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you know, and you look in the research and there are studies about shortening attention spans. We go from a few years ago in the land of marketing, you're looking at your ideal video length being like a minute. We're down to like seconds now.
Yeah.
The adoption of certain apps, like Instagram's too long. We're over into TikTok land now where it's like literally like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Right. And you can go and look at like the content creators. They're like, get your message out in the first 4 seconds. Like that's what we're dwindling our attention span down to.
Which is funny because like for me as like somebody with ADHD, it's actually something where I'm like, you don't even get enough information in 4 seconds. Like for me, I'm like a very much person, like I like to dive deep. Right. And so like for me that it's funny that to watch all these, like everybody else kind of get sucked into it. And for me, I'm like, how do you get anything out of that? Like, I just don't understand. Like just because I like to dive deep so much, but that's just, I guess preference more than but it's also intention that like, I'm going to spend time getting what I want out of it.
It's also an ADD symptom though, right? Hyper focus.
Yeah. Like
that, like really getting lost in a thing. It's one of the things that can be like really problematic about it, but in the right context, it's really cool, right? Because you get like really immersed and you can get that depth level. So what I think we're seeing is like the result of increased screen time for sure. And that's something that, you know, you hear about it as a buzzy word, blah, 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 blah. We're going to talk about how to kind of move that around a little bit more. And then being cognizant of the effects of like what content is coming from that. And not just from the social media stuff, not just from the news media stuff, not just from like the documentaries and the Netflix and blah, 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 but just general life, because it goes into then what people are talking about, right? You know, you go into that work conversation and everyone's like, you know, concerned about like this, well, like, are they going to give us, you know, increases because inflation and how this and blah, 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 blah. Like that's an extension of that same threat registering thing. Right. Yeah. And then
because once your body is in the biological state of being ready for a threat, it treats everything like a threat.
Yep, exactly. And you're in that hypervigilant thing. And you and I have talked a little bit about the stress hormones and kind of the neurotoxic effect of things like cortisol. I think it was kind of, you were saying.
Yeah, like prolonged exposure to it. Basically, over time, your body's ability to turn your stress response off in safe situations becomes like damaged, essentially. Yeah. And so things like burnout are, if you look at like a biological level, it is like if you are at a stressful job, for example, it could be on a biological level, that's a workplace injury. Right? Yeah. Because of a repetitive strain, essentially. It would be the same thing as like if you develop carpal tunnel. Yeah. It's just all at a brain level.
You're kind of overusing that stress
and response. It's going to take time for your brain to heal in order to be able to get back to normal.
Which goes back to our thing with the threat thing is, so we've seen this increase in inputs. We've seen an increase in anxiety and fear producing inputs. We've seen an increase in comparison value inputs, right? Because
I would add another piece to it as well, kind of going back to, this is, you know, you would talk about like controversial, whatever, right? I think that there has been an additional layer during COVID as well, where people also, I think, have been with some of the like economic interventions, there has been some coddling and some insistence on the goal is to be comfortable while we wait this out, right? And then that just became the expectation that like if life is stressful, then the expectation is that you shouldn't be stressed. You shouldn't, right? Like there is a healthy level of stress.
Productive.
Yeah, and there's a certain element that like to expect that you are not stressed at all actually just robs your ability to be resilient and independent and
well, it's the point of the emotions, right? Like if we were talking about shame earlier today, if I feel a reasonable amount of shame, it's going to get me to stop doing or pay attention to that behavior I just did. And then you can use it as a motivation to change that behavior versus just like top loading with it all the time and just carrying a big basket of shame around everywhere you go and just feeling terrible. Yeah. Different types of usages, right? The other thing, so we've got all of these things that are like inputting and at the same time, we had the erosion and continue to have, and not just due to the pandemic, this has been a trend in our very individual focused society of, lessening social connections, right? I think people are lonelier than they ever have. That's its own little pandemic going on there. They're more disconnected than they've ever been, right? En masse. We're used to being in a group. We're group pack animals. And, like the amount of people that live on their own or live with one other person or work from home all day by themselves in front of a laptop or whatever it is, we're seeing more and more separation. And that's a huge problem because it takes us out of something that the human animal needs and uses as a stress mitigator. So that's one. And then you've also got, especially now, it's like less doing and accomplishment of things. When we were, we'll go back pioneer days, you got to go churn your butter and you got to go chop down the firewood and you got to do all these things. When we do things as humans, we get a natural little dopamine dump when we accomplish tasks. Doesn't have to be a big task. You clean out your sock drawer properly. And there
are entire video games that are insanely popular that are entirely based on that like hunter-gatherer mindset of like, you could go play games like Minecraft or there's some like Viking one, I can't remember what it was. Anyways, but there was Valheim is what it's called. Anyway, the whole thing basically is like go out and chop down trees and build a little raft, build a house, and it's like very shortened and you can do it without physically exerting yourself. But like, man, I could sit and play that game for hours.
Well, and those game creators are popping into our hard wiring, right?
Totally.
Very, very, very intelligently. Like props to them for that. Because if we're not accomplishing things, like if we go back then caveman days, we have like hunger, discomfort, etc., meant to motivate us to go pick all the berries. So then you have berries to eat. So you don't starve your stupid self to death.
Yeah.
Right.
And to plan ahead and to be efficient and to share with your neighbors so that everybody's so that you don't have a very limited gene pool and you get like weird kids and whatever. Like you got to have a diverse community, right? Like all of that goes
Which is the theory on why we get that dopamine, that satisfaction from accomplishment.
Yeah.
But now like you're seeing people working on tasks where the timeline to accomplishment is so far out, it doesn't hit on any of that human as an animal stuff, or they don't accomplish anything. Like if you work in one of those jobs where you're just doing kind of a thing, you don't really know what is the outcome, or I'm pushing this paper around so I can give you this paper.
It's like office-based like TPS reports or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just doing data entry for this thing. And, sometimes those jobs are productive in that dopamine way, but a lot of times, we're not, right?
Yeah.
So it's going into that. So what we've got is you've got the creation of additional stressors and threat responses and all of that. And then you've got the erosion of the things that naturally help us. Like, and another big one that is, I think, forgotten quite often is free time, like just space.
Yeah.
And like space that's unoccupied where you're just like hanging out. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and we were talking about like mindfulness and like that kind of like peaceful space. And how it manifests differently. I'm a big like yoga person because I have to do something to regulate this shit.
Yep.
But we were trying to find, she's like, I wouldn't like yoga. It wouldn't be my thing. But I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And I said, but I know one of yours. And she's a big animal person, has some pets. And it's just that like chilling with her pets time. regulation time. So it can look like a whole bunch of different ways. But again, that's being eroded more and more because when you've got, a commute on top of that, you got to take care of the kids and then you got to pick them up for daycare. And then you've got two people working outside of the home. So now you got to figure out like, how are we doing the feeding everyone thing? Like it erodes our time so much so that we are losing that processing time, not only to process threats, but also to go into the optimization landscape of having time to like dream and enjoy.
What do you think? This is like a little bit of maybe this is an aside or I'm jumping ahead or something, but like just for yourself, what do you feel like would be the minimum amount of time for yoga, right? If you said, okay, like if my life is absolutely crazy and busy, what is the bare minimum that you need in order to feel like to get the maximum benefit? Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's a tricky question because I think it depends on the amount and the intensity of the stressors. If there are stressors, right? Like you might have a day where you're like, everything is rosy. So it depends on that.
But like if life is stressful and you have a lot going on.
Yeah. So then I go into like hyper focus with that because I know I'm not going to get any productive outcome at all unless I handle that stuff, right? Often we're like, okay, I've got so much to do. I'm going to keep doing this stuff and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, then you get mashed potato brain and it's just not happening. So I'll just stop. So the yoga thing happens. So that's like an hour, at a half an hour of meditation or whatever. Increased sleep is another huge one, right?
Totally.
Like I'm going to bed now. And this is just happening because your body's using more resources to manage that, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say, probably a few hours a day if you are at like heightened level, like 8 out of 10 kind of stress levels for sure.
So you actually would do it even more.
Yeah, 100%.
What would you say to somebody who's like, but I already have so much to do already. Now you're telling me I have to add 3 more hours onto my day, or
well, because I have this conversation particularly around sleep and rest often with clients, and they're like, "Well, I'm so busy. I got this stuff and da 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 da." You know what is really not good for outcomes and being productive?
Having what I call like a dull saw.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, burnout. Yeah, burnout,
totally.
Being overwhelmed, being tired, being like whatever. You're not doing your best work then. It's just not happening. Especially if your work involves a lot of like mental clicks. That's not going to happen. So what you're doing essentially is you're like prolonging and slowing down that accomplishment value. And then while you're busy doing that, you're also removing your capacity for innovation and joy, purpose, connection, all that. Because I don't know about you, but when you're really stressed and then you're having a conversation with your wifey or whoever, what's the quality of that interaction?
It's a lot. It's one of two things. It's either a lot more edgy or I am on Mars and like just not present at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the edgy one comes from like, that's a signal to us that we're like, your brain is like, we're above capacity here. Like we don't have the room to do this.
I'm kind of just an asshole in that mode, honestly.
Just short, like, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't, blah, 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 blah. I'm not negotiable. My compassion's like out the window. I'm not listening, like you said.
A lot of like looking for like concern. Not that I go this far, but like internally, the feeling sometimes when it's really bad is like, why are you complaining? What do you want from me? Like that's actually
tapped.
about
you're just like, I'm tapped out. And I think, so it has effects on every area too, right? So then our relationships that day is kind of like a bit off or blah, 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 or whatever. And then you just double down on that because if you continue to do the deplete, there will be a stop. Like you will hit a wall. That is a thing. So with that knowledge, I think comes into this interesting concept, which is very simple, but it's that we have a limited amount of thought resources. Like you can't just keep thinking and thinking and thinking. Consequently, you can't keep doing and doing and doing. So with that, it's like, oh, this is finite. And it's finite like every day, every hour, every moment. Like it's a finite resource. And I think if we treated it like that, we would probably allocate those resources a little bit differently generally than we just kind of like do when we're just, floating through life. I think that's a huge one.
Because a lot of the stuff that we allow in, if we go back to the like social media stuff or whatever, what because your brain, and it's not just like thinking intentionally, it's sort of like that background kind of like your brain, anything that you give to your brain or you expose yourself to, your brain's going to sit and chew on it for a while, right? And it's going to be, and so I think that a lot of that is kind of, knowing that, is that, do you really want to spend your limited resources on that?
Well, in the realm of business, we talk about opportunity cost a lot. So if I take all my like pennies and I invest them over here, and there's a thing that would have been really great over here, well, I can't do that because I've already allocated them over here. I don't have unlimited pennies, right? So our thoughts are the same way. So you can go, what is the opportunity cost to me entertaining this input? So I was giving you an example earlier when we were chit-chatting, is I can be a very like paranoid person. So hubby was up working in Fort Mac for a little bit. So I'm home in the house. It's dark at night. There's lots of sounds. So I can do a couple things, right? I can choose something where I'm going to get immersed in it. It's going to be productive. I can read a nice book, happy story, whatever, watch some comedy. Or I can put on a horror movie. Okay. They're kind of fun sometimes, right? You know, it's but
by yourself?
By myself at home.
It's a terrible idea.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible idea.
Yeah.
And so then if you think about it and you ask yourself that question in the moment and I go, what is the opportunity cost? What is the general effect? What is going to be the consequence of me doing this? And it's like, oh, I know I'm going to be like jumpy as hell. It's going to screw up my sleep. I got a podcast to do tomorrow.
So
I don't have time for this shit.
One of the things that I think that I'm also hearing in this too is like, so there's the intentionality of it, but there's also a piece of like knowing yourself well enough to know how it's going to happen or what's going to happen with it. And also stopping to be able to ask yourself, what do I want to get out of, like, if you were to do that, to what end? Yeah. Right? Like, why would you do that? And if the answer is, oh, because I love horror movies and that would just be a great night, then cool, do it. But if not, then maybe don't, right? So like knowing yourself and being realistic with yourself too.
And in order to know yourself, we go back to that same thing, is there has to be an allocation of some of your mental real estate to discovering yourself. Because we don't just wake up and know ourselves. The whole knowing ourselves thing is actually quite complex. It takes a lot of metacognition, so a lot of thinking about thinking. It takes a lot of social interaction as well, and a lot of like analyzing those interactions and getting into the depth of it. Sometimes it takes external resources, right? Whether it's therapy or reading philosophy or whatever. And then you're like, okay, this is kind of who I am. And the fun thing about the who I am question is this is for today. Right? So it has to be a continued allocation of thought resources to that, to the like know thyself thing. Yeah. And once you get the know thyself thing, then there's another step which goes into the know the input, right? So then I'm like, okay, horror movie, input. Well, the know thyself. I know I'm fucking paranoid. Yeah. Working on it, whatever.
I didn't say that.
I'd be a great watchman in
really
watch. I know. I was just thinking about like what would the role for that be in the evolutionary thing? I'd be
it's the watchman.
Guarding everyone. Yeah. So I told you if I was a dog, I'd be a German Shepherd. What are they good at? Guard dogs, right?
There you go.
Anyway, so you know the self, and then you look at the input. Okay, the input is horror movies. What is the effect of the input on you? I have some previous experience with horror movie watching. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So you got to be a bit predictive. But in this case, I've watched one before. I know the outcome. And then it's like, there are rapists that are coming to kill us everywhere and lock us in the basements. And there's that Saw guy wandering around. Okay. Yeah. I don't need any of those thoughts in my head. And so then you have another period of thought required to be like, do I want to do this? And that's where that like autonomous thinking, choice, and then execute. Right? No. So what else instead? So what is the actionable thing? Right? So it's like this whole stream, and that's just about one stupid little choice, right? So you can get quite
But you have to
granular.
know, but in order to even know what that is, you have to know what your values are. You have to know what basically like what you want out of life. And not necessarily, I think that sometimes people are like, oh, well, I don't want to make like a 5-year plan for my life. It's like, that's not what this is about. This is about like what actually makes you happy. Like, what do you want? Not what you want to accomplish, but more of like, what do you want your life to be about? What do you want your life to be full of? What do you want each? Because then knowing those things and kind of and intentionally creating what are the things you're going to do and what are the things that you're going to have boundaries on, you know why at that point.
100%. Right? And I think like I'll give an example of so was having a really stressful work week. Just shit's on fire everywhere, whatever. wake up in the morning and, this and this and this and this and this problem and that problem pops up into my head. So at that point, you can just let it run because your thoughts will like kind of do their own thing, or you can direct them. So it's like, okay, I know what kind of day I'm going to have if that just like goes like that, if we're just going to be passive about it. Instead, you like switch it, be like, I'm going to have a great day. That's it. Not a complicated thought. Going to have a great day. What that does is that thought redirection. So I'm like out of this stream into this one, and then it can be whatever action, right? So I'm going to make a cup of tea. Boom, accomplishment value, tea's made, yay. So it's those types of things, that intentionality and those mindsets and cultivating them to push it. And it might work in that moment, might not work on the next one, but you're going to keep pushing it because thoughts, like most things, are habit forming. Right. And we see that because we look at a lot of like patterns in therapy, right? Somebody comes in and their pattern is a negativistic pattern, or their pattern is a doomsday pattern, right? Or catastrophizing pattern or whatever. And we can kind of talk about those a little bit. But when you've got any of those patterns, the easiest way to see whether they're working for you or not is to check in with your internal regulator, because you'll get that feeling, right? That's the easiest one. I know some different therapists and stuff like that are big on feelings wheels and stuff like that. I can use them sometimes and they have a place, but I don't, because I love that, like, just tell me where the is. Tell me what thought gives me the like gross heebie-jeebies, and to what degree, right? Is it a little like, I got to finish that paper, or like, I got to bury somebody, you know, like, I don't know why that came to my mind. I have no idea why it goes there. It just does. Maybe it's the horror movie thing or whatever, but it's that piece, right?
Yeah.
So when we get into that, I think that it's that thinking about the thinking about the inputs, being able to evaluate the inputs. And then there's that whole other piece after that is.
By the way, real quick, for people at home who want a really great short book about that feeling and how to have a good relationship with that feeling, I recommend The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Have you ever read that one?
No.
Very short, but he talks about that feeling as the resistance. And he's like, that's your compass. If that's the feeling that is, it like, cool, do the thing that, like, whatever the thing that gives you the feeling, do that, and it probably will lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, there's a message in it, right? We see that a lot with procrastination. Like, the more you procrastinate, the worse the stress about it
If you can
gets.
train yourself to feel that and then push right through it, that actually that's huge.
100%, because then you're addressing whatever the problem is. Like, say you have like a little argument or whatever with your bestie, and then you think about it and you're like, I'm just going to go do this instead. I'm going to distract. I'm going to pacify, whatever. Versus like, oh yeah, I said this. Maybe that was a bit of a dick move, and then she did that. I should probably tell her like, I don't like da-da-da-da-da-da. Go solve it. Done.
Yeah.
Right? So kind of getting into that like productive thought versus like unproductive thought. Pleasurable thought versus unpleasurable thought. So it's a bit of that. And like I said, we're getting into that thing where we're seeing, I guess, less and less value placed on thinking.
Well, and I think a lot of this too really comes back to, when we talk about like the thought patterns and like what sort of like the habit forming nature of it, it goes right back to like, what are the messages that you're allowing into your brain? Because if you are hearing those things, then you will internalize them. Your brain is going to put them on repeat. They're going to start seeing. It's the same reason why when you buy a red car, you see red cars everywhere, or whatever. It's the same deal.
100%. And I think it goes into humans are highly programmable, right? And we're very easy to influence, right? We're influenced by the things around us. Sometimes that's a positive thing. If I'm hanging around my like yoga teacher who's like, boss bitch when it comes to like healthy stuff. I'm like, I'm gonna get more healthy. I'm not gonna eat the cheeseburger after doing this, whatever. It's inspiring, right? That's what we call inspiration, is being influenced by positive things, positive people, whatever. Same deal goes with all the negative inputs or negative people or whatever. That's what's going to be rolling around in your head. And you're in allowing that in, you're making a choice to donate your mental real estate to that. And then it's going to have that opportunity cost as well. So it like doubles down. It's not fun. And I think that that's kind of one of the things we want to get people valuing it. I know sometimes I'll be like, okay, why don't you take some time and just think? And people are often like, I don't want to waste time. I'm like, we have to kill that as the narrative. It's like, no. You're not wasting time. You're creating your reality, which is like literally the most important thing you can do in your own life, right?
What would it? Yeah, yeah, and which no, that's just avoidance, right? Like that's to me, that's the first thing that comes to mind is that you're just avoiding doing. Because the other one that I hear too is that like when people like start, like when I say, yeah, you know what, why don't you just sit and just think, like the look of fear of like, oh no, I can't be alone with my thoughts. Do you have any idea,
like the monsters that live in this
totally,
thing?
Right? Like, because then I have to come face to face with what my life has become or something like that, right? Like, or because of the consequences of my choices or something.
Well, it's in a little bit also, if you don't do it regularly, it accumulates like dishes in the sink. And then you have
that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, you don't have one plate to wash. Now you got a whole bunch of a mess. So it's going to be harder. And you haven't built up the stamina of doing it. So it's harder. Right? Like anything, if I go out for I'm going to run a 5K now, that's not going to work well because I do a whole bunch of no running, right? So there's a bit of that. The other thing with it though, is there is like, we're very subject to this social narrative of we have to be producing something all the time and everything has to be productive and outcome oriented because I got to be like that guy on TikTok with the Lambo and and I only have so much time and I got to get married and have a baby by this time and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, you don't. And then the more you strive to do that with the removal of the thinking thing, the less you're going to do that. So you get like stuck in like a weird little loop thing, which is a bizarre thing. So I think the thing is like with this, it's like, how do we get that understanding that thoughts have value and they have like extremely high value and it's super productive, right? Even if it doesn't seem directed or productive.
And if we kind of, like, I always bring these into like the neuroscience realm for a second. Really, what we're talking about is that like if you were to look at the brain, you've got, you know, we could call like, if for people who have like video, right? Like people at home, just like clench your fist, right? The top part of your brain, particularly the front part, the right behind your forehead, right? Prefrontal cortex. Evolutionarily, that's the most advanced part, the most recent. That's what makes us human. That's the part of us that is capable of planning, of interacting socially, all those sorts of things. And when we get stuck in these like trained loops of things where it's all walnut brain, that's all like the downstairs part of your brain, which is the same part of your brain that we share with other mammals, lizards, whatever. Chimpanzee, all of that, right? And so basically what we're really advocating for is migrate out of the downstairs brain and into the upstairs brain and be intentional. And the upstairs brain can train the downstairs brain to do things. You can train yourself, right? But you actually have to do that because if you're ever in autopilot, you will always that you're not using that part of your brain that is capable of planning how to create a wonderful life. You're just going with the flow. It's literally on a neuroscience level, it's the same exact mechanism that we use to train dogs. It's the same, right? It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, and then you can get trained by whatever's around you. And
except we use social media or whatever instead, right?
I'm not into, like, I want to create, like, whether it's for my clients or myself, the most autonomous, free kind of version of myself that is possible. So I want to be in charge of
But you've got to engage the smart part of your brain in order to do that.
100%. And you have to want to, and you have to be deliberate about it. Because we all have that capacity to just be like, oh, okay, we're just going to like go into our human as an animal kind of part of the brain and bop, and be completely driven by like urges. Okay, you know, now I ate all the potato chips. I wasn't thinking about like making a healthy dinner, blah, blah, blah. Like you're going to be driven by these like pleasure, pain, avoidance kind of things. Because that's that part of the brain, that's all it's capable of. It's like keep you alive. So nice survival thing. Go find pleasurable stuff. So eat and fuck. So we like can make the species keep going. Yeah. Like let's do that.
Because that's all that part of your brain is even concerned about.
Yeah. And then run away from things that are going to kill us. Like it's straight survival, right? And that fight, flight, or freeze or whatever. It doesn't have any of the complexity that we need in order to navigate this world now. Right? Like we need that smart part of the brain to make sense of it because it's not just a threat. Like there isn't just like a bear jumping out and being like, you know, it's the thought about like, oh my God, if I don't deliver that report to my boss, then I'm going to get in trouble. Like that requires engagement from your frontal cortex. But how do we get out of that? Like, how do we do that? How do we set it up for that? How do we filter it? Especially with all of these things. So we know like a little bit, evaluate the inputs, know yourself a little bit, but what is something that we can use kind of consistently to start, solidifying that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's several things. For me, one of the big ones again is like having that time aside. Like there's the time aside to kind of figure out what's important to you, because what that also does is that also is like, well, what are the positive reinforcers that I can use to train my walnut brain to actually motivate me to do stuff, right? What my values are, what feels good, and how to do it, right?
So what would be an example for you of stuff that you do to kind of like set it up so that it makes it a little bit more friendly to do it?
Well, we talked about this when we were kind of talking about this before, but and this is more of I don't know if this is kind of like it's sort of a mindset of how to deal with the stressful stuff when it does come up, because we're not going to get rid of it completely, right? But having it's a pretty silly example, but it's little, and I train myself to do it. Is that I have a very specific ringtone on my phone. For people at home, it's the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme. People put it to great effect in like online on like memes and things like that, right? Yep. Of how ridiculous. But for me, it sort of represents like life is ridiculous. And the more often that I can remind myself of that, and to remind myself of like, just laugh a little bit about it. It's fine. Like, this is ridiculous, and we'll be able to laugh at it one day, even if this is the most stressful thing possible right now. If you can remind yourself, like for me, I find if I just remind myself, like when something bad happens, is like, of course, all right, whatever. This is dumb, but it is what it is. Let's go, right?
So I heard it go off, and it's funny because it is an external cue that comes in, so that when you're not necessarily in the mind space to like do that switch to kind of happiness.
So like when I see like when I go and fill up my car. And like 6 months ago, it cost me like just over $50 to fill up my car, $60 or something. And it cost me over $100. And I see that number. It's like something in my brain then is like, I still see that number, but the music comes with it. And I'm just like, this is so ridiculous. All right, whatever. Let's just keep going. Like it is what it is, right?
Yeah. Like, so you're talking about creating these little mental constructs that you can kind of have in like ready to pull out whenever there's a stressful thing or a hard thing or whatever. I told you, like one of mine is watching, there's this like cute little video, this little boy, he's on the playground and he's like trying to get from one little like kind of toadstool thing to another. Mm-hmm. And he's like got his face all scrunched up and he's super cute and super tiny. And he's just like talking to himself and he's like, I can do hard things. Mm-hmm. I can do hard things. And then you see him like make it to the little toadstool and turn around and he's like, I can do hard things. And I love that because we use that in my yoga thing now, because I'm like, I have no distress tolerance. And the whole reason I started that was for that. So I'll get into a thing and I'll be like, oh, this is terrible. And either my yoga instructor or in my own head, it will be just like, you can do hard things. Mm-hmm. And that generalizes to not the yoga thing of just when you're like, I don't want to write this report. And I can do hard things. So having those mental constructs like built in that are kind of cute or silly or funny or whatever the thing is, super handy. The other thing is I like to plan for my worst self, not my best self. Because my best self is the one that does like meal prep and, is on top of things, goes to bed on the right time and like doesn't scroll too much and blah, 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 blah. That person, that's great. I need to plan for that other one that's like lazy and wants to sleep in and hit snooze and like eat chips and da 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 da. And the way you do that is you have to plan when you're not in that headspace. You want this version of yourself to plan for that version of yourself. Yeah. And that means putting things in that are barriers and restrictions. And it was interesting because I was just mentioning, I think I'm doing a little experiment in August. I think I'm going to switch I ordered a flip phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ordered a flip phone.
That's going to be very interesting. I watch. Actually, I didn't mention this before. I did watch. I've looked into other people who have done this before.
Yeah.
The number one downside that they found to it, they said actually, for the most part, it was actually fairly positive. Okay. I'm very interested to see what your experience of it is. The number one downside that they found was they missed that like a really fancy smartphone has a really good camera that you can easily share pictures with.
I did think about that because that's kind of the one where you're like, okay, but so I got the flip phone. I got it because I am very, very obsessively interested in controlling inputs, right? And then also setting my worst self up for success.
Yeah.
So my worst self is like, let's go look at Pinterest and waste an hour doing that or whatever. Worst self can't be in charge of stuff, right? Like Wally the Walnut self can't do the thing. So I was like, well, just remove it, create a barrier. And it was funny because I was talking to somebody and they're like, well, why can't you just use some self-control? And I was like, well, because my best self can.
Yeah.
But that guy, that version of myself,
self-control is also a complete
can't.
Myth, right? Like that's
100%.
Like it's
like, I don't know whether... Well, there's a
Yeah.
human animal self doesn't. It's like you
Right.
put a steak on the table, the dog's going to eat it kind of thing, right? So that's what I said basically was like, that is the equivalent. Like not putting boundaries or barriers or systems in place is the equivalent of going and stocking your pantry with every one of your favorite treats and candies and da-da-da, and then being like, now I'm going to start a diet. Like not going to work, right?
Yeah.
It might work for that hour. It might work for several hours or minutes or whatever, but it's not going to work because you're going to pop into that other self that's impulsive or is tired or, had a little argument with your husband or whatever the thing is. And it's going to be like, you know what? Fuck that, gummy worms.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're like out.
It's so funny because I feel like, I don't know why my brain went to this, but I'm just thinking like, okay, is there a possibility that could ever work? And the only thing that I can think of where it would ever work, if the whole point of it was that it was in the house and you did it and didn't do it. And your intention going in was that you were going to put yourself in a situation where it was there and you were deciding not to. It's the only way that it would ever work. And you would have to know yourself well enough to know that you
100%.
Right? You've got to be within a window of being able to do it.
And it has to be like systematic enough, right?
I say that as well because there's no way in hell the snack cupboard in the pantry is going away. But if like part of my intention is it's there, but it's not something that I'm going to engage with, then it's closer I'm being intentional about it. But then at the same time,
you're going to have a higher failure rate though.
I'm going to have a higher failure rate. And also part of the success is also not just don't have the shitty stuff there. It's also have the good stuff there available as well. Right.
100%.
Set yourself up for success.
And then the next part of it is have some flexibility. So maybe if I'm doing the super healthy eating thing, I take all the treats out of the pantry because that's going to be like one of those boundaries, barriers that's set in place, program that's automatic. But I don't remove the possibility of going for a walk and getting an ice cream because you don't want it. So you're like, okay, I'm going to be perfect all the time. I'm going to put these systems in place. I always have to stick to them because there is a degree of flexibility. And that's where we get into that thing of like rationing, right? How much is reasonable?
Yeah. And I think too that like even knowing like there's going to be more failure rates, I think also like the idea of incremental success. And that you're not going to just immediately be amazing tomorrow. You're not going to, right? That like this often happens in terms of, when we talk about like addiction or we talk about whatever, right? Like lots of different things that like you're going to be, you need to be able to give yourself time to improve and to have some, the long game as well.
Well, and you need to go back and think what is going to make it less likely that I'm going to be successful at whatever my goal is, what is going to make it more likely? And often we'll set the goal and we don't think about anything like historically, how have I been with that? What do I know about myself that's going to take me closer to that, take me away, distract it, not going to work, etc. And then when you've done that and you've scripted out, and it was interesting because I was in a meeting with you earlier today and you said one of the things you realize is like the quality of the outcome is way higher when there is a degree of planning before and when the planning is really well done, right? Because then you're like, okay, here's my goal. I think people get to the goal setting because that's a want construct, right? Like I want to eat healthier. That's an easy one. You can get to that. It doesn't take a lot of thought to come up with like, I want this, right? But then to go backwards and go, okay, this brings me closer. This brings me farther. I know myself. Okay, my treat food, my favorite treat food in the entire world. I mean, tater tot problem. So I know if my goal that week is let's do this like super clean eating, let's nail it. Those things are not allowed in the house. They're just not. It's not going to work. I know myself. I like them too much, etc. So they're not in the house. And then you put an option in to do something else, whether it's go out for dinner or whatever the thing is. But if you can't do the plan and like the think and the free thought to like know yourself, so I know I have a tater tot addiction, I'm pretty aware of that. And then to do the plan for how I'm going to get closer to that goal, even if the goal is just to be calm, like it doesn't have to be like a typical production goal, but then you put that in place, the likelihood that you're going to roll with that is way higher. Now, the extreme nature of the boundaries depends on how you are as a person. So certain people, super disciplined, blah, 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 great, or they're already good at that area, right? So say I have a friend, she's a personal trainer, she's super healthy. She's already good at that area. She doesn't need to remove the tater tot situation from her house because she's got the habit down where she's going to be able to choose the healthy choice and then sometimes choose that. I don't have the habit down when it comes to the tater tots. So I got to like do it enough so that it is the habit.
And you also got to have something like, well, what are you going to do instead?
Yes.
Right?
And it's got to be like, make it easy on yourself. Don't make it hard on yourself.
Yeah.
So I know right now that if I like have the smartphone thing and I'm walking around, I'm going to get bored because I'm very impulsive and And I'm going to like end up like cannibalizing some of my thought energy on dumb shit that I don't need. Like there's only so many parrot videos that you can watch that are productive. Not a real thing. So put a barrier in. So we're going to try the flip phone barrier, but it could be a lot of things, right? It could be the bedtime reminder. It can be the not having the screens in the bedroom. We've been to my house, there's like no TV in the living room. That's because it forces the alternative, which is conversation. Right? It's
I was
just
going to say
not there.
smartphones, everyone on their screen looking at their phone.
Okay, there's a whole nother thing. There's a RFID line box upstairs as well that goes with the no TV thing. But the point is like getting people to spend time thinking on that planning.
Yep.
And then you only have to think about it once. You put the system in place and then it rolls. Right? But we're not doing that because we do the like, oh, I don't have time for it. It's a waste of time. This isn't efficient.
And also like a million ads everywhere you go of like, this is what should be, this is what the norm should be. And
yes,
all that.
I think that would bring us to like one of the things that's like a pretty big criticism of, I would say, our society and the messaging about humans. It's like we're way closer to that human as an animal thing than most people think. And that's one of the reasons like at Shift, we don't do a bunch of cognitive therapy only because you need to talk to the human animal. And that's not the cognitive part, right? But a huge role in decision making, right? So it's like understanding that your thoughts are also that part of your brain's thoughts. And then like putting the systems in place for it. So that's one. And then you talked a lot about mindsets as being a different way. So these are like habits of thought frames kind of.
Yeah. So for me, like just in terms of like mindfulness, right? And I think that this really is sort of having because I think that a lot of times, especially in the short term, like long term, we get to a place where like all the same stuff's going around and you're like, you just are zen and you're like able to, it just washes over you or whatever, one day. But in the meantime, until you have fully trained your walnut brain to be zen, essentially what's going to happen is that you're going to have moments of being aware that you're being crazy and irrational and whatever. And so there's his name's Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. He created what's known as mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it's a form of it's a fusion of like meditation and like psychiatry, all sort of like CBT sort of stuff. But he talks about 9 attitudes of mindfulness. And I personally like them as ways of like, once you notice and catch this, that like, oh shit, I'm being irrational or I'm stressing myself out or I'm numbing out or whatever. Having these as a way of kind of coming back and recentering yourself, or you can think of it as like different lenses. I think what he would say is that these are different attitudes to cultivate within yourself so that you can see a situation through this lens and to be able to change how you feel very quickly.
So like, I'm just going to choose to put this lens on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that the more you do it, this is why like when people talk about like meditation regularly, that you could kind of do specific meditation with some of these things and intentionally putting yourself in that mindset, it will actually change how you feel as well. Basically what it does, if we go back to like that upstairs brain, downstairs brain, or like the logical and then the walnut brain, part of it is almost a way of like having the logical part of your brain actually be able to calm that walnut brain down.
There.
It's one of the very few ways that it's capable of doing that. If you just try and rationalize it away, it's not going to work.
No, it doesn't speak that language.
Yeah, totally. So so we can quickly go through each of these 9 attitudes of mindfulness, and I think they're really valuable. So the first one is an attitude of non-judging, right? So often when something happens, even it's a matter of like, oh, well, I feel stressed out, and I don't want to feel stressed out. I don't want to, like, if I shouldn't feel this way. I should feel like this, or I should be more grateful. It's like, no. Like, it's fine. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge us. It is what it is.
Yes, there's like a certain amount of healthy detachment and
and I would say like even non-judging would almost be more like just observe it. It doesn't have to be anything. It's like if you're stressed out, okay, well, you're stressed out. Like, where do you feel it? Just notice it, observe it.
Which is interesting because that is like one of the components of our therapy, which relates to a little bit of exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And we know when you're exposed to an unpleasant stimuli, it will eventually extinguish the stress response to it.
You know, I haven't thought of this in terms of that, but I wonder as we continue on if each of these things probably naturally come up in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And if people get stuck, then maybe what we are doing is like what's helpful for them is fostering some of this and then going back into it and then like
100%
carry it back in, right?
Well, because if you think about it, like I was, in Calgary, they used to have the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and then they had those crazy ski jumpers.
Yeah.
That are like, that's nuts. Okay. And so you go, who in their right mind would get on there and just ski down it? Like, you have to be daredevil, crazy, psycho, whatever. This is my opinion of ski jumpers anyway.
Yeah.
But it's that incremental exposure, right? Like a little bit, you're going down a hill, then you're going down a bigger one, then you do a little jump, then you da-da-da-da-da.
Did I tell you I bought a skateboard, by the way?
Did you?
This is like the weirdest thing ever. I can tell you about that in a second, but keep going.
But
It's just reminding me of this.
It's that exposure to it, right?
Yeah.
And the more you expose yourself to something scary, like heights are meant to be scary for humans, you get to a point where they're not scary. So clearly for the ski jumper people that have incrementally exposed themselves to increasing like craziness with heights, they're not afraid of it, right? If you put you or me up there and you're like, okay, slide down this on your 2 feet, then do a little flip at the end.
My experience with, even like, because I had always wanted as a kid to get a skateboard, and my parents were not about that. Like the whole culture around that just was not
a thing.
And so I went and bought one, and like first day wiped out. Like, and it, like, if you've never tried to do a skateboard before, like center of that thing moves when you stand on it, and was surprise, right? Mm-hmm. But after that, I was like kind of joking with my kids, and I was just like, you know what though, it hurts less than it hurts less than living my whole life wishing I would have done it.
So you're just like,
right?
I'm going to do
like,
this.
I'm going to do it. It's fine. Whatever. Right. So anyway, so that's non-judging is like letting it be.
And that's where that thing is. If we don't stay with the thoughts and we don't expose ourselves to our uncomfortable thoughts, then we develop like a whole phobic reaction to them. Mm-hmm. And that's like a problem. So the non-judging thing has to be in place in order for you to sit with something. Yeah.
The wording here that they say is like assuming the stance of an impartial witness to your own experience.
Detachment.
Right. Objectivity. So like I had somebody explain it to me once as like, put on your lab coat, get out your clipboard, and observe
like
how you're doing.
Play shrink to yourself.
That's it. Just like that you were like a wildlife like scientist on the savannah.
The psychologist has jumped onto the skateboard.
Totally. And they're just
what will you do?
Exactly.
David
right. So that's non-judging is the first one. The second one is an attitude of patience. So patience, right? Patience is a form of wisdom. Patience is a form of just letting it be as long as like, sometimes these like attitudes of patience, you can try and foster that while at the same time observing your own impatience. And you can have both of those at the same time if you need to.
Yeah, or if it's just like a non-voluntary thing. The other thing with patience is it is the stretching of time, right? And we talked about the whole like social media shortening it and making like more urgency and like shorter attention spans and stuff like that. So the antidote to that is like to stretch time. And like that's
and a lot of it is, and we're going to get to acceptance a little ways down here, but things are going to take as long as they're going to take. And you being impatient with them
it prolongs it.
It does not matter. It's not going to make it any easier. It's only going to make it harder. And so you might as well just accept that it's going to take as long as it's going to take. Right.
And I think it's a skill, like it's a thing you practice, just like the non-judging thing or whatever,
yeah.
or all of these mindsets, right? Like you don't come out and you're like, yeah, I'm super patient.
Yeah.
No,
that it's just,
I'm a little more than I was yesterday.
That it's the kind of thing that like, that it might end up being, like it's standing in line at the grocery store, right? That like, you know what, I'm going to just sit here and I'm going to patiently wait this out. And then if like the old lady in front of me is taking forever to do that, to like load her, whatever, right? It's like, That's okay. Take as long as you need. That's fine.
Kind of creates some sort of usefulness to certain situations like that normally we'd be like, da 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 da. It's like, no, I'm learning a skill now.
Yeah. Absolutely. The next one is the attitude of a beginner's mind. So the example that I used earlier with this one is that how often do you get into an amazing technical miracle of like an automobile and you drive somewhere, and the idea of a beginner's mind is somebody who's like, if you were an alien that landed on this planet today and had no idea about a computer or even what we're doing right now in recording, right? That we've got like multiple cameras and a computer that is literally the air that is escaping from my lungs is being translated into like a diaphragm in front of me that is vibrating and converting it into electrical signals. And like, that's freaking crazy, right? And to actually appreciate how amazing everything that's going on, we are wirelessly connected to an entire network of computers through invisible waves that are transmitted through the air. Like and then we worry about how things are going. It's like, no, that's just appreciate how amazing all of this is, because 200 years ago you were like, things were so different and things possible. Are so much better than they were even like. Right. And so just appreciating that for what it is. I think that's one of the most powerful ones.
I think the thing with the beginner's mind also, we're seeing the effects of not employing that a lot. With the whole failure to launch or this urgency to kind of skip rungs of the ladder. And one of the things I was joking with somebody the other day, and I was like, that there's no option for that, right? Like you can't do it. Yeah. So the more you try to skip to the top rung, the harder you're going to fall, and you're never going to get anywhere. If you just grind it and start at the bottom, start in that beginner's mindset, you will get there so long as you don't quit. Mm-hmm. Like it's an inevitability. So I like that one a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is the fourth is attitude of trust, right? So developing a trust in yourself and trusting in your own feelings and trusting in what you want, trusting in that things are going to work out, right? Like all those sorts of things. It's far better, to trust your own intuition, your own authority, to trust yourself and be like, no. Especially in a world where, if you have like relationships in your life where maybe people have opinions, right? It's like, well, hang on. What do I think? How do I feel? Because that's important. And I think that a lot of times, whether it's through external factors of all sorts of kinds, we again, it's really kind of what we're saying in general is like, yeah, but what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's like the questioning thing goes with the trusting thing too, right? Mm-hmm. So I think on the good end of the spectrum, it's like maintaining that autonomy to be like, do I believe who is telling me this, or can I question it and explore it? That's good, promotes autonomous thought, critical thinking, Sometimes we get stuck where we don't have trust in people or institutions or whatever because of past shit that's happened. Yeah. And it goes into that trauma realm. Like trauma is a massive eroder of trust, especially when it's like attachment trauma, early trauma, if you've got like violent stuff, whatever, it starts to flavor your perception because your walnut brain is like, oh, based on these past experiences, people are bad. That's when you want to address that, right? Like that's what we do a lot in therapies. It will like be recalibrating negative experiences so that they can align and evolve into the ability to still trust when it's a good situation, right? So I think that those are things. So you want to address stuff if it comes up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, kind of going back to those like the non-judgment and just being aware. Real quick, I want to get through these ones too. So we've got the next one is non-striving. This one's interesting because, and I think that the argument is not necessarily that you should have all of these all of the time, right? But these are all lenses that are helpful to see life through, at least on a regular basis. The idea of non-striving is really, so much of what we do, it's almost the opposite, but in a good way of what we're saying of like, you must plan ahead, think about this, be intentional, that there's also just room to just not do anything for any reason, to just sit and not in a numbing out sort of way, but just in the fact that like, you don't have to be on the treadmill all the time. You can get off and just chill.
and being existing.
And just be, exactly. Just be.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I like it.
Next one is an attitude of acceptance. I feel like we've talked about that a little bit, but I think part of it is really seeing things as they actually are and accepting, right? So if and being okay with it, not in like a it's funny because when you say like a resign yourself to the reality of it, or like not in like a give up kind of a thing
or a powerless kind of way.
Yeah, but
I think it's more in a way where you are as objectively observing and interpreting the data that you're getting as possible.
You're like you're like very radically true with yourself, real with yourself.
Yeah, you're not editing it to like add like idealization narratives or like, oh, but if it could be this way, but it can't be that way because it is how it is. So
I've got a client who has been going to AA, and we were kind of talking about the different steps of AA, and the first one I think really has a lot to do with this, of just like the first step. I can't remember the exact wording. It's been a while since I looked at it, but basically like just look in the mirror and be real with yourself.
Yeah, you're like, it is the thing.
It's
right?
like, it is what it is. It's fine. I'm not saying you got to beat yourself up over it. In fact, please don't, because it's going to be worse. But just coming to terms with the fact that like this is the situation that you're in, and if it means like whether that's it cost me over $100 to fill my car with gas. It is what it is. Acceptance. That's okay. Well, that is the challenge that is in front of me today. That's fine.
It goes into the self-acceptance thing. We talk a lot about trait theory, right? And like knowing who you are, and that sometimes you just are how you are. Sometimes it's changeable stuff, but sometimes you just are how you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And even things as well, like the acceptance is that you are accepting how things are right now. Right.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily have to be
in this moment.
And I think it's important to question, doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the way it is forever, or to be realistic with yourself about those things. But like, why not just accept that, like, if, for example, if you're overweight, why not just accept like, hey, well, these are the consequences of what was going on. Maybe part of it's genetics, part of it's whatever, but this is where you're at right now. Just accept it. It's fine. And if you want to do something about it, you can do something about it, but don't beat yourself up over it. Just accept it.
Well, the acceptance of the reality of the situation allows you to actually do something about the situation. If you're going to pretend, no, I'm not overweight, they just don't like me because they don't think I'm blah, 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 whatever, you don't actually
or it's not my fault
starting
or
point.
Whatever.
Exactly. Well, this happened, right? As opposed to like, I am a bit bigger because I decided to go do all that tater tot eating or whatever. So now I should probably just action that if I really want to change it.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. Next one is an attitude of letting go. So this is a good one too, of just that, like, I think that so often we get stuck on things. It's very interesting as far as, I mean, we could go down the road of like cancel culture and stuff like that too, right? But I think even just like, we have this sort of question that we ask sometimes, like, is this the hill you want to die on? Is this, like, how important is this to you really? Like, what's important to you, and like, what are you learning to be able to just let things go?
Well, again, going back to that, like I was working with somebody very vindictive, like wanted to always like go and, prove it to them or sue them. And I was like, okay, let's look at the
like
mental
spite and revenge,
like the mental real estate that you're going to have to allocate to getting that vindication, to holding on to that. Is that worth that? Because the opportunity cost is over here. You having a happy relationship, enjoying your life, being like not burned out, blah, blah, blah. You can totally do that, but just understand what you're actually choosing. Yeah. You're not just choosing, I'm going to hold this and I'm going to get all these other good stuff as well. No, you used up your energy on that. So you're not having that now. Is it worth it still? And sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not.
Totally. Yeah. Because not letting it go is going to continue to cost you more.
Yeah.
Right. And is that worth it? But a lot of the times it's not. Right. So the next one is an attitude of gratitude. Right?
I know you love that.
The rhyme makes me ill, but I do like this one a lot, because I think that actually being like appreciated, it kind of goes back to like the beginner's mind thing a little bit to me as well, right? But just knowing, like, so often we just don't appreciate what we have, right? And we don't, like, especially when we're stressed and our body is in a position of here are these negative things. My body, I'm hyper vigilant. I'm looking for the negative. Our brain naturally is, and like evolutionarily is designed to do that when you're stressed. Having this as a lens to a way of kind of being able to recenter yourself back on.
It's a thought switching activity.
Absolutely.
Right? You're like, okay, I'm not going to think this. I'm going to think this. I don't feel like thinking the gratitude thought, but I'm going to do it because I don't feel like paying that opportunity cost.
And it's not a question of, I think that, you know, it's one of the really well, like, scientifically validated like interventions for like CBT is like a gratitude journal, right? I think that people really chafe against that when, because I think that sometimes what happens is that we think that gratitude is a form of dismissing or minimizing the negative.
Yeah, or it seems fake or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is why you have to pick shit that you're actually grateful for real
Totally.
when you do it.
And part of this whole thing of like cultivating this, it's actually, you are capable of feeling gratitude. And I think with each one of these, the more that you are able to intentionally trigger the feeling of gratitude within yourself, that's huge. Right?
100%.
Because then then your stress level kind of goes away to some, right? Like you're actually able to help that emotional part of your brain calm down. That walnut brain actually chills out a little bit, because the walnut brain that's also the part of our brain that where we feel gratitude.
Yes, because the one thing about like our little Wally, not so bright, can't hold multiple states in himself, in his mind at the same time.
Totally.
So the walnut brain is, it's like all stressed out and da, but you're like, feel gratitude. I'm going to make you do it. And then he's like, feeling grateful. That other one went away. It's gone. Yeah. He can't keep both. So it's good. Yeah. You can play little tricks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last one is a mindful attitude of generosity. And so that's something too. I think that that's a lot of it. Like that, there's multiple different directions that you can go down with this, but this one really comes down to being generous with others, being generous with yourself, giving yourself the benefit of the doubt when you make mistakes, when you fall short, whenever, but also being generous with yourself of like, you know what, I'm gonna go and do something that I enjoy just because I deserve it. And I just want to do something nice for myself, right? Or do something nice for somebody else, right? But I think it really comes down to, you know, that like generosity and compassion and love and being able to give that to yourself and to other people.
And getting that out of the grand gestures level, you know, like you might be just driving and be kind of annoyed and the guy cuts you off. Maybe the act of generosity in your mind is just like, give him the road. Let him have the lane. Yeah, totally. Go for it, buddy. Get home 2 seconds.
One of my favorite,
faster.
it's like a very little thing. I don't even know if this like it makes sense, but whatever. It's ADD and it's like the end of the day on Friday, whatever. One of my favorite things in moving to Edmonton that both my wife and I noticed is that there is something in terms of like the like decor between people on the road that if you let somebody else in front of you, look for the wave.
Oh, I always do the wave.
Right? The wave.
So rude if you don't do the wave.
Like waving from Edmonton is the only place I've ever seen that does that.
Really?
Yeah. Like if you like next time you go to Calgary, look for it. You won't see it.
I'm gonna let a whole bunch of people in just so I can test.
Right.
This
so and then you wave. Right. And like it's always the look in the rearview mirror. You wave. It's like, yeah, thanks, man. Right. It's like it's a moment of connection that I've always appreciated about like since we moved to Edmonton from Lethbridge that I really think is awesome. But and it's little things like that, right? Like it's things that are that, you know, if you're out to dinner and it's like it's okay, it's time to tip, right? It's like, okay, well, like I mean, give an extra 5%, whatever, right?
Yeah, but I think it also just like be kind, like the simple little things.
Yeah.
So that's a whole bunch of us. See, we started everyone off with all the like, this is all the crap in the world. And we ended on these like nice little notes. And it's that direction to it. And then if you're stuck on you can't get that done, you can't jump into those other mindsets and it's really not working and you really are trying, enlist some help.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are absolutely going to be things that, you know, like if you've been through the experiences that make this, if your walnut brain is fighting you so hard that it feels almost impossible to even do some of the stuff we talked about today, there are things that we can do to help you with that.
Yes.
Right? There are things, there's a lot that we can do. And And we're actually pretty freaking good at it.
And it fucking works. Like that's the thing. So it's kind of fun with that. And then if you don't want to jump into the whole like therapy as a thing, ask other people in your life for help, right? Like if you're sucking at the gratitude thing, unless someone be like, can you do the cheesy gratitude thing with me or whatever, and find a way to get it done. Cause it's like life is too short to not end up in these mindsets. Just too short.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not into it.
Cool. All right. Well, is there anything else, Andrea? I feel like that
I think
comes
we're all
full
over.
circle.
It does, Zach. It was nice to get back. Nice to chat with you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening to the Shift Show. You can go to shiftgrit.com. And that's where our podcast is. That's where if you're in Alberta and want to do therapy, that you can go there and you can come and hang out with us and we'll figure some stuff out. That's cool. So, right on. Thanks for joining me, everybody, and Andrea, and we'll see you next time on the Shift Show. Ta-da.